I found a second set of prints that matched my boots, only bigger. They were in a patch of sand below the ridge, on a little spur I had walked out to for a view and then came back. My tread had a broken square in the heel. This other set had the same broken square, just stretched longer. They lay right on top of my own like someone played a game and stepped where I stepped. I stood there a while with my pack still on. The air felt thin and bright. There was no one else on the trail all morning. I laughed once, just a quick breath. I told myself some guy had the same brand. It wasn't that rare. I took a picture with my phone and then slid the phone back in the hip pocket. The pocket zipper snagged. I yanked it. I kept going. I was doing 4 days alone. Loop trail through the low mountains. Dry country. Pine and rock and these wide basins that held wind even at noon. I had planned it out. 2 liters on me, more at the creek. I parked my car in the turnout and wrote down my route on a piece of paper and tucked it under the wiper in case they needed it. No one knew exactly when I would be back, just by the weekend. I liked that. I liked the quiet. That first day, I made good time. The trail crossed scree in long slices. Every step on that loose stuff made a crunch that sounded like glass in a bag. I hit a saddle. The weather radio said clear, then clicked over to some farm report. I kept the little radio for storms. It was crank-powered. I liked the tick of the handle. The afternoon got windy. That helped with the heat. I saw a snake and 1 deer. I saw no people. I made camp near a dry creek bed where there were some old firs and good flat spots. I boiled water for noodles. I felt fine. The sun went out fast. It does that up there. I turned on my headlamp and walked around with the pot to let it cool. The beam looked weak. I had charged the batteries at home. I tapped the lamp with my knuckle. The light was bright near my feet, but didn't push far. 10 steps ahead, maybe 12. The dark looked like it was standing there. I sat and ate and listened to the radio as it scratched, then went quiet. I heard the crunch of gravel from the creek bed. I assumed it was a deer. It was steady, though. A step when I took a step. When I stopped, it stopped, like a kid mirroring. I swung my light. The beam hit trunks and brush and bounced back close. The hairs on my arm stood up. I felt stupid for that. I said, "Hello?" into the trees. My voice sounded thin. The radio burst into static for a second like a blowout, and then went dead. I slept anyway. I'd hiked far. The inside of the tent felt safe and small. I woke once to a soft slide sound. I lay there and listened. The wind flapped the fly. The zipper on the door made a tiny tick, like it had moved a tooth. I told myself it was the wind. I went back to sleep. I woke up early because my feet were cold. The front of the bag was a little damp, like I had breathed into it wrong. When I got out, the tent zipper sat down a half-inch. I noticed because I am picky about that stuff. I always leave it all the way to the bottom. Now the pull was up just a bit. I pulled it down and checked my lines. One guy line had a clean end. It wasn't frayed. It looked like a cut. I squinted at it a long time, thinking I must have run it wrong and stepped on it. I ate fast and packed. My map was under a rock where I'd left it the night before. My topo map had wet marks on it. 2 palm shapes. It wasn't raining, and the ground was dry. The prints were damp, like something was wet and heavy and had leaned on the paper. I touched the spot and then smelled my fingers. It smelled stale and metal, like pennies and old water. I started to feel angry then. It made it easy not to be afraid. I told myself some idiot was messing with me. I said that out loud, very funny, even though there was nothing there. I decided to change my route. The loop had a cutoff down in the basin. I would take that and shave a day. It wasn't running from anything. I said. It was just smart. Less time alone since there were prints that weren't mine out there. I walked fast. The crunch on the scree kept pace with me through the morning. It came from just behind and to the side. When I stopped, it stopped. When I ran my hand on the rock, it did a beat after, like someone learning a drum. I turned a lot and shined my light even in daylight under branches. The light still felt short, like my batteries were tired. I changed them anyway. No difference. At a junction, the cairns had been kicked around. There were little stacks all pointing the same way, and then another group pointing somewhere else. It looked like hands had moved them, not wind. The map said go south. The rocks pointed east. I went south, even though the tread that way was faint. I said names of things to myself as I walked so I wouldn't think of the crunch. Knife, spoon, stove, filter, socks. I checked my pack for my snacks. The bag was open. I am sure I cinched it. One granola bar was in the wrong pocket. No food was gone, just moved. My stove was on the other side too. That made me stop and breathe a long time. I had to put my hands on my knees until my head felt normal. I used the radio and tried to pull weather. It clicked into a dead line, then leaped into hard static that made my fingers shake. I spun the dial. A man's voice broke through one time on a word storm, and then it went out. Blue sky above me. Dust at my feet. I turned it off. I hit water by late day. It was cold and running under a log jam. I crouched and filled my bottles and pumped through the filter. The water on my hands smelled like metal again, even though it was clean. I rinsed and rubbed and couldn't get rid of it. The smell got into my throat. I decided to keep moving and camp late. I didn't want to sit and listen all night. I thought if I hiked at night, I could watch the light and see whoever was trying to be cute. I ate jerky as I walked. The trail climbed. The wind got stronger. The sky stayed clear, but it felt like the air was holding its breath. I turned on my headlamp. The beam cut out to the edge of the trail and dropped off. It was like it hit a wall and stopped. The edges were sharp. It made me think of when you shine a light into smoke, how it shows a cone. I turned around fast on a long piece of gravel and brought the light up and down slow. On the third sweep, I saw a shape just past where the beam died. A person shape, not moving. The head and shoulders and arms held right at the side. He was watching. He didn't bother to duck. The dark swallowed him quick when I moved my hand. I yelled, "Hey!" There was no answer. I tried, "Do you need help?" It sounded wrong coming out of my mouth. I picked up a fist-sized rock and kept it in my hand. I walked backward for a while, then forward again, then backward again. The crunch kept time with me. It didn't hurry. It just stayed there. I felt wild. I thought about jokes my brother would make if I told him this story. I thought about swinging the rock as hard as I could. When the trail narrowed to a shelf, I stopped and faced the slope and held the rock up like a dumb props. "Enough," I said. "Enough." The radio in my pocket kicked and bled static. Just a rush. It made a warbling sound like a bad cassette. I took the antenna and snapped it down and stuffed it deeper. The shape stayed beyond my reach. When I camped, I did it under a boulder outcrop like a porch. The wind pulled at the edges. I tied my guy line to the rock and checked everything twice. I took out my flare and set it next to my head. It was a cheap one I got for the car. Red plastic. Pull cap. I put my stove and fuel in the vestibule. I slept with my knife inside the bag. I felt foolish doing that, but it was that or sit up all night. My hands smelled like rust no matter what I did. I woke up to the tent slapping me in the face. One side had fallen down, The guy line there hung loose with the end cut clean. The door zipper was up an inch. I did not hear it. I sat up and ripped it down and shined out. The beam hit grit and sticks and just died. The crunch of gravel came right to the edge of light and stopped. It was close. Closer than before. My heart pounded in my ears. I grabbed the flare and pulled the cap and struck it. The white hiss was loud and mean. The tent glowed red. I crawled out on my knees and held the flare up and swung it. For a second, the light blasted everything open. I saw him. He was a man. Not big, but not small either. He was smeared all over with something dark. Oil, dirt, soot. He'd rubbed it into his hair and face. His eyes were blacked. Not blind, I think, just ringed and thick like he had put tar around them. It made them look like holes. He had tape across his eyebrows. He was holding a blade. It had a hooked end, like a pruning knife. He kept his mouth shut. He looked like a person you'd sit next to on a bus if he didn't look too hard. He flinched from the flare a little, like a cat's shoulder. Then he took one step back into the dark and I couldn't see him at all, just the shape the light couldn't touch. I didn't say anything then. I kept the flare up and I waited until my hand shook. I could feel the heat on my knuckles. I started to cough. It wasn't the smoke. It was fear. When the flare burned down and threw off metal bits, I tossed it into the creek bed. It sizzled and went hard to black. I was blind for a second after that. The dark felt thick. I went back into the tent and I put my boots on and I took down the half that was still up. I didn't care about sticks and poles. I shoved the fabric into my pack. I threw the cut line away. I moved. I wanted to be anywhere else. It was late. The wind had a new sound. A storm was coming. I started downhill in the night with my headlamp. The beam was a small circle. That was it. I kept it low so I could see rocks. The crunch kept pace. Gravel on my left when I moved left. Gravel on my right when I moved right. I tried to run once and almost twisted my ankle. I stopped and swore and then I laughed. It came out wrong. I took the radio out, cranked it, and put it to my ear as I walked. Static. Static. Then a woman reading numbers. And then static. I yelled into it, "Hello! Is there a ranger out there?" It popped like a fried egg and then went dead. I hit it with the heel of my hand. That did nothing. I thought about doubling back to the junction I had passed a mile ago. Maybe he would commit the wrong way. I turned and went back up. It was steep, but I had adrenaline now. I walked for 20 minutes. I came to a dry wash that looked like the one before. There in the sand were both our prints. Mine on the way down. His on top, heel to toe on my own, lined up like he was stepping only in my places. And over that, new prints, bigger again, laying over both, like he had stretched his step to show me. I stood there and said, "You win." I said it quiet. I could not go back up through him. I felt tired the way you feel sick. By dawn, I was ragged. Clouds were laid low over the peaks like a lid. I moved into a basin with open ground. No trees. Just big rocks and brush and old snow. Wind ran across it and flattened grass. The trail vanished, then appeared, then vanished again. I went from cairn to cairn. They looked off. The rock towers pointed a way that shaved the angle and would drop me into a cut. The map in my hand had brown stains from my fingers. The wet handprints from the other morning had dried there and made the paper buckle. I turned one cairn, and the bottom stones were packed with fresh wet leaves. I don't know why that scared me so much. There were no leaves like that in the open. I looked up, and he stood right at the edge of my headlamp ring, even though it was day. The light from the cloud cover made a dull white. His outline was a dent in it. He was patient. That was the feeling he gave off. Just steady. I put my poles in my hands and went the direction the map said. I kept my eyes down. My shin hit a low rock. I went to my knees. When I pushed up, my right knee made a pop like a knuckle, only deeper. It sent heat up my leg. I cursed and sat back on my heel. I could move it, but every straightening hurt. I stood and tried to walk normal. The crunch moved with me, slower now. That made me angrier than anything. He wasn't tired. He wasn't carrying anything. He could do this all day. The rain started as spit, then got serious. The metal smell came back stronger with the wet. It was the same as before, on my map, on my hands. I crossed a little trickle of a stream and slipped and caught myself. I smacked my palm and felt skin slice. I looked and saw a thin cut across my hand. Not deep, just enough to sting. I thought about the hooked blade. I thought about what it would feel like in my back. I said, "Not today." That was for me. I said it a lot. Near afternoon, I hit a slot where the trail cut through rock. Both sides went up and there was a ravine past it. You could see the bottom, and it was all loose trash rock, sharp as shells. The storm sat right over it, raining hard. The radio starter chirped in my pocket. I didn't touch it. I stood and watched the slot. If I went in there, it was one way. If he followed, we were in a box. I didn't like either idea. The open was worse. The open gave him room to disappear. I went into the slot. The walls dripped. I walked bent like an old man. The crunch was right outside, not hurrying. I got to the tightest part. There was a chokestone there you had to swing around. My knee screamed and I barely cleared it. I came out and the ground under my boots turned to scree. It sounded like 1,000 small plates breaking. The storm lowered. My headlamp wasn't even on, but it felt like night. I wanted to get to the bottom of the ravine and across before he came through the slot. He came through the slot. He didn't run. He walked down the wall like he had been built for it. He kept the hooked blade low. He didn't yell. He didn't say anything. He had thick black stuff smeared in streaks on his arms now too. It made his skin shine under the rain. I pulled my largest pole tight and locked it. I held the other like a spear. I took the stove fuel from the side pocket and jammed it in my jacket. I dug the flare out again. The first had burned out. I had one left. "Stop," I said. My voice was small, even in that small place. He kept coming. He kept to the edge of the sightline and used any dark crack to lose shape. He moved like wind moves a curtain. I popped the flare then, before he got too near. It burned clear white this time, hot and loud. He flinched again, this time a full step back. I saw him better. The black around his eyes was some kind of grease. His nose had a scab. His lips were chapped and split. His clothes were torn and layered wrong. He had a belt around his chest like a strap, and from it hung a little bundle of something that clinked. The hooked blade had tape around the handle. The tip had a burr like it had been used to cut wire. He was just a man. I kept telling myself that. He was a man. I started moving sideways down the slope so that the flare light stayed on him. My knee gave on a step, and I slid a foot. He took that and came in quick like a dog seeing an opening. I jabbed with the pole. It hit him in the ribs. He grunted. The blade came up and under. I felt it slice my jacket and then skin. It was like a hot finger across my side. I didn't want to look. I worked the pole and pushed, and he fell back a step, arms out for balance. Rocks slid under us and went rattling down. The flare hissed higher. The rain made the rock move under my boots like marbles. I told myself if I went down first, he would be on me. I told myself to stay on my feet no matter what. I let go of one pole and took the fuel out and bit the cap. I tried to spray it in a fan. It came out in a steady stream and hit the flare and flashed. It wasn't a movie fire. It was just a wide lick of blue and orange that pushed heat in my face. The skin on my cheeks tightened. Hair on my arm curled. I took that and shoved the flare toward him with the fuel still running. He had to throw his arm up and step or burn. He stepped. His foot went and he slid. Then his other foot went and he sat down hard and all of him started to go. He stabbed the hooked blade into the scree to stop himself. It made a screech. Sparks jumped. He held. My knee bent wrong, and I fell to one side and put my hand in the hot spilled fuel on the ground and felt it light. It felt like the skin wasn't mine. I yelled like a small kid, a high, stupid noise. I shoved my burning hand into the wet scree and mud and slapped. The flare popped and went to half-life. He came for me again, even from down there. He used the knife and the other hand to crab up. I smell burned hair and that same stale nettle under it. My face felt raw. I wanted to run, but the slope was a trap and my leg was bad. I picked up the other pole, the one with the carbide tip, and I waited until he came in range. This time I put all of me into the swing and I put the tip into the meat of his shoulder. I felt it go through jacket and into something that gave and then hit bone. He made a sound that didn't sound like anything. His good hand came up with the hook. He tried to hit my wrist. I pulled out and hit him in the knee. The pole bent. He screamed and slid. He grabbed for me and got my pant leg. It tore a strip. My foot went. I fell on my hip and then my side. The hooked blade flashed and I kicked at his hand and felt it jerk, and then he lost it for a second. The blade went past my boot and cut the lace. The boot went loose. I rolled and pushed with my good leg and put the flare right in his face with my bad hand because I didn't care that it hurt anymore. I hit his cheek with the burning end. He reared and his head went back and he howled. The black around his eyes bubbled white. He let go. He slid for real then. Not fake, not a feint. He went down the slope on his hip and then on his back and tried to dig in with his heels. Rocks rolled with him and hit and sparked. He hit the choke stone I had just come around and his body bent weird. There was a noise then, like a big breath pushed out of a tight space. He didn't stop there. He went over the drop. There wasn't a cliff. Exactly. There was a shelf and then more rock. I crawled to the edge and saw him farther down, 20 feet, maybe 30, tangled. He moved once. His arm made a swim motion and then he went still. I lay there with the flare stick smoking in my bad hand and the fuel leaking out on the ground and the rain on my face that felt like knives. I could not feel my burnt skin right then. I could feel my knee. It throbbed like it had a heartbeat. When the flare went out for good, the dark came back and I lay there and I listened. I thought I would hear him get up. I waited to hear the gravel crunch and come up the slope. It didn't. The radio made a soft ticking in my pocket like the crank unwinding. That was all. I got up on my hands and one knee. I talked to myself the whole time I did it. I said, "Stand up, get your pack. It's just your leg. Grab your stuff." I crawled back up to my pack. The tent was shoved in there wrong and hanging out. I pushed it in. I sat with my back against the wet wall and I wrapped my side. The cut there wasn't deep, but it bled like a mouth. I looked at my hand and saw blisters under the mud. The skin peeled up in one place. It felt numb now. I tried not to think what it would feel like later. I drank water and it tasted like coins. I sat and waited for more light. There was no more that day. The storm stayed. I stuck to the wall and edged along until the ravine flattened and let me out. It took hours. Every step on that loose rock sent a sound out. In my head, each sound would come back wrong, with someone else's step on top, heavier. My knee got big under the skin. My face wept some clear fluid, and every time the rain hit it, I saw white. I walked until full dark, and then I stopped because I had to. I pitched what was left of the tent, and it slumped like a cheap hat. I didn't care. I crawled inside and didn't zip the door because the pull hurt my hand. I lay there with the radio in my chest pocket and the flare tube empty and my knife somewhere in the mud where I dropped it. I slept like a dead thing. In the morning, I heard voices. Real ones. 2 men and a woman. They were on the ridge above me. They called down and I answered and then cried because of how normal they sounded. They were day hikers. They had seen smoke from the flare, or my stove fuel, or maybe just my bag in the middle of nowhere. They had no idea. I told them I fell and hurt my leg. I showed them the cut and the burn and made a joke about cooking. I didn't mention a man. I couldn't make my mouth shape it. One of them had cell service. He called for help. We sat and waited in the drizzle until a ranger came up with a radio, and then more people, and then a litter. They wanted to know if I could walk out. I said I could if I had to. I did not want to be carried, because the angle of it and the way you can't see behind you would send me over the edge of myself. I took 2 guys and used them like poles, and we made it down slow. Down at the trailhead, they put me in a truck with heat that blew on my face and made me shake. The ranger asked me what happened again. I said I fell and met a rock wrong. He wrote that down. He asked where my friend was. I looked at him. He lifted his eyebrows like the question was normal. He said someone else had been out there because they found prints. He asked if I had seen anyone. I said a couple of times. Far off. I said voices. He looked at my hand, at the blistered places, at the cut guy line when I showed him the tent, and he wrote more. He didn't push. They took me to town. A nurse cleaned my hand and my face and put something cold on it that made me want to cry again. They wrapped my knee and told me not to be stupid with it. When I was alone, the room felt too small. I heard the crunch in the hallway when the night nurse walked past, and every time she stopped, I heard one more crunch, like a foot settling on gravel just beyond my door. I sleep now, but I wake up sometimes because I think I hear it. That steady pace, staying with me. At home, I keep a light in the hall. My headlamp sits on the table. When I turn it on and point it down the hall, the beam looks short. When I go for the weather, when rain is coming, the radio kicks and throws static hard enough to make my teeth hurt. Sometimes I pause in the dark on purpose. I stand quiet. I tell myself it's dumb. I wait. In the quiet, from behind me, close as a hand on my pack, I hear one single step on loose gravel, hard and dry and slow, like someone keeping time. Then I go. I don't look back. I move. I keep moving. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.